Hello and welcome back to Walton on Trent, and welcome to the West Coast Main Line, where I'm waiting for a very special train. In fact, I think I can hear it. That was the one-off Standard Class 8 71 Treble O Duke of Gloucester passing through Exton earlier this month. As much as I admire the big steam engines, it was the headboard that piqued my interest. The Royal Scot was one of Britain's most storied trains, and its illustrious 75-year history is very much the tale of the West Coast Main Line and the modern British Railway. So this month I've got you a first-class ticket for the 400-mile sprint to Glasgow Central, as we take a look at the West Coast and Walton's flagship train. There's an update on work at the station at platform level and street level. My Mark III coach project is crawling along. And there's a locomotive biography for my oldest and newest 87s. The whole episode got a bit big, so I've decided to split it in two and give you part one tonight and part two next Sunday. But enough waffle from me. Our platform at Euston has been called, so let's get on board, settle into that big squidgy seat and crack open an iron brew. For anybody used to the hourly frequency of today's Avanti West Coast service from London to Glasgow, you may be surprised to know that 30 years ago there were only 6 trains a day in each direction. Only one of the 12 stopped at Stafford, 1S47, the first northbound intercity service of the day up the West Coast, departing Euston around 6:20 a.m. Times varied a little over the years. This was a semi-fast service, stopping at every intercity station on the line, arriving in Stafford at 8:15 and Glasgow at 12:05. Until May 93, if you missed that one, you'd be kicking around Euston for a whopping 4 hours, until the Royal Scot departure at 10:25. This was the West Coast flagship service and the fastest train of the day to Glasgow. The remaining 4 departures left at 25 minutes past 12, 2, 3 and 4, and that was it. Of the 5 true express services, only the 15:25 stopped at Crewe, with all other trains running non-stop to Preston, then Lancaster and Carlisle. The first train from Glasgow left at 7:05 a.m, followed by 5 more evenly spaced departures. The 9:12 a.m. and the 11:18 Royal Scot, 1M25, both skipped Crewe, but the 3 afternoon trains, 13:17, 15:05 and 1700, all called there. From summer 93, the northbounds were evened out, with a new departure at 8:50 a.m, 1S55, which also conveyed motor rail vans for Carlisle and Glasgow. The Scot now left at 10:50, with 3 more trains at 12:50, 14:50 and 16:50. All trains except the Scot now called at Crewe. The southbound times changed a little, not by much, with motor rail vans being hitched on the back of 1M28, the 13:08 departure. And that was pretty much the service schedule for the remainder of my era. So when you see an 87 or 90 powering a rake of Mark IIIs through here at top speed, odds are it's a Glasgow service. With the exception of the northbound Dawn semi-fast, the full journey took around 5 to 5¼ hours, but the Scot did it in 4 3/4. The service, which eventually became the Royal Scot, began in 1862, operated by the London and North Western Railway as far as Carlisle, and north of the border by the Caledonian Railway. For many years it departed from both ends at 10 a.m, mirroring the Flying Scotsman on the East Coast main line. Fierce competition between the West Coast and East Coast routes delivered ever faster journeys, culminating in the so-called Race to the North of 1895. But following a fatal derailment at Preston in 1896, an agreement was made to slow the Anglo-Scottish expresses up both lines to a minimum journey time of 8 hours. This agreement held until the early 1930s, by which time the 1921 Railways Act had taken us into the era of the Big Four, and in 1923, West Coast routes were amalgamated into the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, or LMS. 4 years later, on the 11th of July 1927, the LMS relaunched their flagship Glasgow service under a new name, the Royal Scot. Initially, the service was non-stop, with an engine change at Carnforth, and the train divided at Symington, 5 miles south of today's Carstairs Junction, with one portion continuing to Glasgow and the other to Edinburgh. The following month, the modern and powerful Royal Scot class of 460 steam locomotives took over the service and set a new British record for the longest non-stop run between London and Carlisle. At Carlisle, an engine of the same class, based at Glasgow's Polmadie shed, would take over. A year later, in 1928, the LNER launched their Flying Scotsman to Edinburgh, showing that the old rivalry was still there. But competition now focused on modern technology, smarter scheduling and passenger comfort. The train gradually became heavier, including the addition of dining coaches, and more luxurious. In 1933, it was hauled by the brand new Princess Royal class, a group of 12 462 locomotives designed by William Stanier and built at Crewe. Now, you know I'm modern era through and through, but even I know a Princess Royal when I see one. And if ever, a steam engine was to appear at Walton, it would be one of these. Here's how it might look. The lines and the livery, what a gorgeous machine. The LMS was obviously proud of them too, judging by this newsreel at their launch.
This is Britain's most powerfulest engine, built by the London, Midland and Scottish Railway for hauling the heavy Scots train between Euston and Glasgow.
It is the maiden journey of the new locomotive on the LMS Scottish Run. The engine has been named after Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal, and she is expected to break all records.
It's a Princess Royal ready to burst out of this well-known LMS poster of 1937, which I used for this month's title card. But Stanier hadn't been resting on his laurels and unveiled the new Coronation class in that same year. Amongst the most powerful steam locomotives ever used in Britain, the class of 38 was built over the next 11 years at Crewe. The first 10 were outshopped in a streamlined steel casing, and 5 of those were set aside for an even faster flagship service, the non-stop Coronation Scot, with a sky blue and silver livery and matching coach rakes. Before the launch, on 29th of June 1937, number 6220 Coronation headed a special train of invited guests from London Euston to Crewe. Here's the story.
Blue and silver streamlined engines of the Princess Coronation class were produced to haul new trains, the Coronation Scots. Beginning with the summer services on July the 5th, these trains were scheduled to complete the 400-mile journeys between Euston and Glasgow and in the reverse direction in 6.5 hours. Blue and silver coaches, constructed at the Wolverton works of the LMS, complete what are claimed to be the finest trains in the world. This, then, was the contribution of the London, Midland and Scottish Railway to this great coronation year, a contribution that gives daily service to the nation, a tangible, living contribution, exemplifying the spirit of the age. The introduction of a new high-speed service is the outcome of many months of work and planning. It was in November 1936 that the first steps were taken to make this enterprise possible. In that month, the engine Princess Elizabeth completed test runs between Euston and Glasgow that achieved world records for the LMS. For this remarkable feat, driver Tom Clark was awarded the Medal of the Order of the British Empire in the Coronation Honours. These runs provided invaluable data in regard to the design of the locomotive, the maintenance of the track, and the riding of the coaches. And on this information, the designs and schedules for the Coronation Scots were based. 1937, in addition to being Coronation Year, also marks the centenary of the opening of the first portion of the London and Birmingham Railway, including Euston Station, the LMS headquarters. 100 years of progress. Here you see a practical demonstration, specially arranged for this newsreel, of the advance that has taken place in the design of engines since the first railway came to London. On the left is the locomotive Lion, 100 years old and still going, if not strong, at least going. Next is the engine Coronation, built in 1911 at Crewe and named to commemorate the coronation of King George V. And lastly, Coronation, blue and silver streamlined product of 1937, huge and massive, dwarfing her predecessors in both looks and performance. Built for power, built for speed, a veritable king of locomotives. On June 29th, after a careful running in, the engine Coronation, hauling the Coronation Scot train, was allowed to show her paces. She was in charge of driver Tom Clark and fireman Lewis. 100 journalists and railway officials took part in a test run from Euston to Crewe and back that provided such an orgy of speed as has never before been indulged in over LMS metals. Until nearing Crewe in the down direction, the running, though excellent, was kept to schedule. But at Whitmore, driver Clark let her have the throttle. From 85 miles an hour, the speed rose quickly to 100. Faster yet and faster, eating up the miles. 102, 105, 108, and she's still accelerating. The rhythm of the exhaust grows stronger, faster. 112.5 miles an hour for 2 miles, smoothly surging over the metals. A supreme effort, and Coronation has done it. 114 miles an hour, the highest speed yet attained in the Empire. Thus Crewe was reached in just over 2 hours at an average speed of 73 miles an hour, and the Coronation Scot had earned her laurels. But this was not all, for though thrills were provided on the down journey, driver Clark and his engine had more in store for the return trip. Subject to speed restrictions, this run was made all out, with the result that the 158.1 miles from Crewe to Euston were covered in the unprecedented time of 119 minutes at an average speed of 80 miles an hour. For more than 150 miles of the run, an average of 83 miles an hour was maintained, while an intermediate 70 miles, covered at 89.1 miles an hour, represents still another British record. The Coronation Scot is now a regular feature of the LMS service, and what is more, a successful feature. In fulfilling her task, she is achieving a dual success, as a dignified reminder of a great national event and as an upholder of the traditions of British railways in service to the nation. Here's continued good luck to the Coronation Scot.
Whatever your modelling era, it's hard not to smile and feel a tingle up the back of the neck watching that, but it might have been a very different film. The record of 114 miles per hour was set less than 10 miles from Crewe Station. The brakes were applied far too late, and the train entered a series of crossover points outside the station at 57 miles per hour, nearly 3 times the speed limit. But Stanier had designed a stable and competent machine, and, thank God, it held the rails. The only damage was to the crockery in the dining car, much to the annoyance of the assembled VIPs, but it could have been catastrophic. But steam had reached its zenith. The Coronation Scot only ran for 2 years before life was interrupted by World War II, and the rail network in 1945 was in a sorry state, leading to nationalisation in 1948 and the formation of British Railways. The LMS had already signalled its intention to move to diesel-electric traction for their mainline services, and the Ivatt-designed 10,000 rolled out of Derby Works just 3 weeks before BR took over. 10,001 appeared in the summer of 1948. After initial service on the Midland Main Line to Derby, both engines switched to the west coast and started operating on the Royal Scot as a pair in June 1949.
Two white-overalled technical observers were the last of the official party boarding one of British Railway's new twin diesel-electric locomotives before they pulled out of Euston Station on Wednesday morning, drawing for the first time the Royal Scot on its daily scheduled run to Glasgow. There were in fact 2 locomotives coupled together, numbers 10,000 and 10,001, with a combined output of over 3,000 horsepower, and they are the first of our mainline diesel electrics. Leaving older and dirtier types of steam train far behind, the new train came splendidly up to promise, and well on time passed through Crewe. From that of a steam train, with simple motor controls and a complete absence of the dust and grime we usually associate with the joys of engine driving. Even the fireman has a clean job, with apparently little to do except watch fuel levels and make sure that the feed from the 900-gallon tanks of diesel oil is maintained. Uneventfully, this epoch-making trip continued. Carlisle was reached and passed, and soon after this, the locomotives were tackling with ease the climb to Beattock Summit, over 1,000 feet above sea level. Another 50 miles and the end of the journey was reached, Glasgow Central, where a reception worthy of the occasion was waiting for the train and its crew. It is claimed that but for existing schedules, the new locomotives could have reduced the time of the 8.5-hour journey by no less than an hour and a half.
Known as Class D16-1, these locos only had around 1,700 horsepower each at their disposal, considerably less than the 2,500 of the Coronations. In multiple, they could muster something more respectable and could maintain speeds of around 37 miles per hour over the formidable summits of Shap and Beattock, but permanent multiple operation was inefficient. In 1953 they were transferred to the southern region for evaluation with their 3 D16-2 prototypes, but all 5 locos transferred to the London Midland 2 years later. This must be the only time a bullied loco hauled the Royal Scot. Their final years were spent on secondary services, with 10,000 being withdrawn in 1963 and 10,001 in 1966. By now, the modernisation plan was underway and about to deliver its first mainline diesel locomotive, the Class 40, and we'll pick up the story here in part 2. Work continues at the station, as it will for some time to come, but a long weekend a few weeks ago really allowed me to get my teeth into the big structural stuff again, and the wall to the rear of Platform 1 has now doubled in height. I'll come back to that in a moment. Deep inside the gloom, all of the pillars have now been signed up and fitted in place. 1 or 2 are a little loose, and I may glue them all in at the top eventually too, but not until other bits are finished. In the meantime, the view down the platforms shows that they are all perpendicular and aligned to each other, which is pretty satisfying. It's taken a lot of time and effort to get to this point, and I appreciate my progress has been a little slow perhaps, certainly in terms of exciting viewing. I've designed and built this as close as possible to how a real building would be built, and I think it all looks properly planted, physically strong and able to support itself, and coherent from both an engineering and aesthetic viewpoint. In fact, it doesn't just look strong, it is strong. These beams can take a lot of weight. I'll be building quite big and quite tall in some of these areas, and the last thing I want is a floppy, wonky, fragile card or MDF structure perched on top of another one which wobbles or moves with passing trains. This is a solid timber structure, and everything else will be too. To add to the appearance of strength and solidity, I'm in the process of adding a skirting to all of the pillars and the lift shafts. These are the coping stone strips that came with my blue brick retaining wall kits that I've used opposite Platform 5, and I was able to buy a load of extras from the supplier. I've cut them to size and then glued them in around the base of each pillar and around the lifts, and they just knit together the whole structure, and more importantly, disguise the uneven joins of the paper-wrapped pieces. I cannot stand seeing buildings with gaps around the base. It really undermines a scene, and you should always look to make things look properly planted. They possibly suit the lift shafts better. I do wonder if they're a little chunky for the pillars, but once they're done and finessed a bit more and painted in either a concrete or asphalt colour, they may blend in a bit better. They're not meant to be an architectural feature that catches the eye, just a practical effect to join the elements together. I'll also be extending them down the length of Platform 1, particularly to tie in the blue brick wall inserts to the platform surfaces. I've resisted the urge to start adding lots of cool little details like vending machines, train info screens, brutes, luggage trolleys, etc., all of which will appear, as I still need to resolve my lighting issues in here. I've tried a number of materials and contraptions, but I'm really struggling to settle on something that's practical, durable and visually effective. It is doing my blooming head in, to be honest, but I'm not giving up and I'm determined to crack it over my winter break. As a reminder, if you haven't been with me from the start, I want a wood panelled effect with integrated strip lighting based on Coventry. I think I've solved the panelling, but I just need to design the structure. It's also got to be able to accommodate signage hanging from the ceiling. I don't want much, do I? Another step forward, literally, involves these staircases. I now have a full set, and it's worth taking a closer look at what I'm doing here while they're in this quite raw stage. The little kits I'm using come like this, so 3 flights and 2 slab pieces. This is the single width set for Platform 1, and I've just super glued them together with the slab piece forming a landing before the stairs turn 90 degrees. The sets on 2, 3 and 4, 5 are double width, and are simply 2 of these glued together as a mirror image of each other. I was able to buy extra slabs from the supplier, and I've used these to build up the bottom of the steps to raise them to the height I need to break through to concourse level. Adding extra steps at the top would have extended these wings outwards and therefore narrowed the space between them here and would have looked unrealistic. This picture here shows all the geometry and measurements involved. and you can see that they create a very pleasing and symmetrical effect. They're jigged here with a piece of timber to get the same clearance and spacing. Obviously I want each landing to be level with all the others all the way across the station. This has turned out way better than I was expecting. As usual, a lot of this was done on the fly, but they do emerge upstairs exactly how and where I needed them to. They are, however, too thin. So, going back to Coventry Station on Google Street View, which is extensively mapped and is a great resource, and using that copper there as a benchmark, I was able to deduce that I probably needed to double the thickness to 4mm. So I've been reinforcing them with pieces of 2mm MDF, and I'm currently in the process of filling and smoothing it all down to give the look of a single piece of cast concrete. I'm also building out the footing here to make it look more solid. Once they look right, I'll be pressing on with handrails which will run up one side, up onto the concourse, round the top of the stairwell and then all the way back down the other side. But just having them at the right size and in one piece does represent a big step forward, as I now know where my concourse floor level will be, and that gave me the confidence to finally press on with the structure at the back of platform 1. So, what's it going to be? In all my previous plans, this building was always going to be an office block, but I'm really limited by my loft roof here, which comes in quite sharply. I have plenty of height elsewhere for a tall office block, and I'll show you that in part 2. Instead, I'm going for a hotel, and I'm increasingly drawn to this one in Manchester. This place has gone by a number of names during its life, but it's probably most widely known locally as the Piccadilly. It glowered over Piccadilly Gardens and Portland Street for about 60 years, sometimes in quite a dismal state. It's been smartened up fairly recently and now operates under the Mercure brand. What draws me to it is, 1, it's not that tall and could be scaled down with maybe losing a floor or two. 2, its concrete structure fits with my whole station complex ethos. And 3, despite being undoubtedly ugly, it's not actually without architectural interest. I really like the restaurant and bar area, which is slotted underneath the bedroom block, and the kind of ingot-shaped end pieces would be quite interesting to model. So that's what I'll be aiming for. The new level I put in already forms the podium upon which the building will stand. This is a common design with many tall buildings, and there are plenty of examples I know in both Manchester and Birmingham. I spent many weekends in this one when I started my accountancy qualifications many years ago. In this space, I envisage hotel ballrooms and function rooms on either side, and then in the middle bays here, it will be full blue brick again, but with vent windows and extractor fans where kitchens and housekeeping, back of house, would be. There is glazing here, but it's opaque and is a disguise for what would likely be a solid wall behind it. Big function rooms in purpose-built hotels often don't have exterior windows. This is a timber frame with 5.5mm MDF panels and is again rock solid. So it gives a good strong base upon which to build my hotel. I'm thinking it'll be modular, probably building this bit separately, and I'll either need to build it all here in the loft or make sure it will fit through the hatch if I build it downstairs, which is a much better place to work. This section is 4 foot long. Not sure how long the hotel will be yet, but this end will need to integrate into the station and shopping centre, which will form the rest of the structure across the back. I haven't decided on what I will do at each end yet, so I've left them open for now and given myself space to do whatever I decide to do. The fake windows are done with these sheets of clear acrylic. I sprayed the whole sheet with a black paint on the back, which then retains the glossy reflective surface on the front. To make them look like bonded panels, I cut them into 3 with a fine blade and a straight edge, then basically reassembled them, cut to cut so to speak, and glued them in place at the top only. The bottom is secured and disguised with these little parapet inserts I cut from spare timber and wrapped in concrete texture paper before fitting an MDF panel dressed in blue brick to the front. These are a light friction fit and I can just pop them in and out if I need to, and if the glass ever gets marked I can pull it out without damaging the surroundings, at least in theory. I do need to check that these glass panels aren't implausibly big at scale. There's obviously a limit to the size that would fit on a truck, so they may need redoing. And if I'm honest, I think I'd have preferred a blue-grey finish rather than a jet black one. It looks a bit late 70s, early 80s at the moment, so don't be surprised if they change at some point. I also used a more lightly weathered concrete paper here, as it's a level up from the grime of the trackside. The entire structure at this end will need blending together at some point. As usual, big ambitious plans. I just need to put my thinking cap on and work out how I deliver them. In part 2, we'll take a look at how the station concourse will shape up and how the scenery will continue right up to the back wall of the loft. I've got far more space to fill than I was expecting. But to close out part 1, we'll do a long overdue bio of Walton's flagship locomotive, the one whose portrait has pride of place in my loft. As one of my longest serving models and predating this channel, 001 missed out on a big flange squeal welcome, but it was the first ever loco to run on the channel, appearing in the launch video last summer. The class Pioneer entered traffic in June 1973 in BR Blue with a cross-arm pantograph and initially unnamed. Allocated to Willesden TMD, it was named Stevenson on 14th of January 1976 at Euston Station, but was renamed Royal Scot in July 1977, also at Euston. I can't establish whether the Royal Scot train was named after the Royal Scots Infantry Regiment, but 87001 certainly was, and carries the regiment's cap badge over its nameplate. You'll also find one of its nameplates in the Regimentary Museum at Edinburgh Castle. It got its first repaint in early 1986, wearing the new intercity colours until 1989, when it was repainted again, this time into my least favourite livery on an 87, Intercity Mainline. Luckily, that didn't last long, and it got its best outfit, Swallow, in spring 1992. From 1999 until 2003, it wore the red and grey of Virgin Trains, but reverted to a retro BR Blue for its last 2 years in service, and regained the Stevenson nameplates from 87101, which had been scrapped in 2002. Luckily, this splendid machine was spared both the cutter's torch and exile to Bulgaria, and entered the National Railway Museum's collection in York in 2005. However, I think it's a crying shame that it's now nothing more than a stuffed and mounted exhibit, instead of a properly preserved functioning loco. It's also not on permanent display. I'd rather see it back home at Crewe, either alongside 035 Robert Burns at the Heritage Centre, or even better, under LSL's care next to 002 Royal Sovereign, running tours on the main line. They say don't meet your heroes, and I've yet to meet mine, but as soon as I learn it's on display at York again, I'll be over paying my dues. Mine runs in the Swallow livery it gained in spring 92, although it didn't receive its high-intensity headlight until a year later. It's had a light weathering, heavier treatment on the roof, and I've replaced the flimsy Hornby pantograph with a sprung Helgen one. It has a driver and second man fitted, so always leads the train in either direction, and runs on a Locksound 5 chip with Lego Man Biffo sound. A Hunt magnetic coupler is fitted to the back. This is the Oxford Rail Mark III type to give close coupling to my coaches. As usual, the front coupler has been entirely removed, as have the tail and cab lights. I favour Railtech's 3D transfer nameplates wherever possible, but they don't do crests, so these are etched plates and badges from Fox Transfers. Coming up in part 2, we'll meet my new Class 87. Eagle-eyed viewers may have spotted some clues already. We'll roll back to the 1960s to pick up the second leg of our Royal Scot journey. And as we alight at Glasgow Central, I'll share my plans for a big scenic area to the south of the station concourse. I hope you'll come back for that. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching. See you soon. Bye bye.